Okay, so just a short video. All this is for is to give a little more encouragement and explanation for the new kind of meditation that we're doing. So this won't be a cohesive video. I just want to make a number of points that I think would be really, really good for everyone to hear concerning this new type of meditation. And some of it wouldn't be necessary if we were meeting in person and people were talking with one another after group. So, it looks like midsummer, towards the end of summer, we'll probably be back together. And some of these kind of videos won't be necessary. But so this video is talking about this new kind of meditation. And what I want to say, first of all, is that I have known about this for many years. But the way that I was taught it was not in the Christian tradition. And in order to do what I feel called to do on this planet, I had to turn away from everything that I had ever been taught outside of Christianity. And the reason for that is because I had had many mystical experiences that were tied to theology that was false. And so I had, when you have mystical experience tied to false theology, it embeds in the brain and in the, your nervous system a certain way. And that can take a long time to come out of. We know that just because of how many people we know who've come out of religions that turned out to be started by con men or con women. But they did have mystical experiences while reading the literature or while attending services. And that can really confuse a person because you're being taught things that aren't true, but there are some true things in it. And you are sincere, and so then you open your heart to the things you're being taught, some of which are true, and then you have an opening to God, and then it's just a human weakness and a lack of education that would make us then say, I had a mystical experience doing this, so it all must be true. So this is what I was up against. So I was taught this, the way to access this state of consciousness in a different tradition other than Christianity, and it was a deep love of mine. But the problem was that it didn't get removed. Well, I guess it did. When I got invited into Christ, I had an experience, and I was sitting down to meditate in my bedroom. And at this point, I had been, if you read my book, the book isn't important though, but if you've heard me tell my story, you know that for about 5 years, I was, experiencing quite intense, prolonged periods of union with God. Sometimes so transcendent that I wouldn't even know I was a human being. I would just be completely merged with God's power. And then also towards the later half, that last 5 years of my path, that union started to happen while I was walking around in the world. And so I started to have this really, quite profound and semi-permanent and at the end permanent sort of direct union with God while walking around in the world. And it was wonderful. But I had some really bad theology, belief systems that had been taught to be mixed in with it that were polluting it and poisoning it. And how do you extract, false beliefs that inspired a person deeply and caused them to get into this union? How do you extract those beliefs from the union? And that's tricky. But it needed to be done because I had been exposed to teachings and beliefs that are inherently narcissistic. You're so special, you're so wonderful, you're chosen, you're so gifted. You've done so much work over thousands of lifetimes that you're an old and advanced soul. Just you are so unique. You are so wonderful. You're so neat. And I can recognize those teachings now as the kindest way to say it is radically partial. Because if someone says, "Is that woman over there unique and wonderful?" I think the answer to that is yes, she is. But there's some other things going on in her too, aren't there? There's pride, and there's ego, and there's fear, and there's shame, and there's all these other dimensions that need to be dealt with. And there's also the inherent limitation of being human. That was another thing we were taught. No limitations whatsoever. All limitations are a false belief system. You can transcend them all. And so then, so all of those kind of teachings lead to spiritual narcissism, which is now, I think, being recognized much more widely, even in the sort of spiritual communities I was a part of before I found Christianity. With what's been going on politically, many serious people are questioning, how did our own people get so angry? How did our own people get have so much faith in their mystical experiences and in their intuitions that they believed things that were abjectly false? And yet they knew them to be true in their bones. And this kind of reflection is now going on in spiritual communities. What are the things we said that allowed people to spin so wildly out of control and to end up in such a place of divisiveness? And so some of that is the narcissistic, all the time thinking of how special you are, and every book telling you how wonderful and gifted and special and beautiful, and you're a god and you're a goddess, and all the time building up, but without addressing the false identity who is downloading that information and thinking that it's being said about the false identity. So big problems for me. So I didn't mean to go. This is going to end up being a 40-minute video. I know it. I wanted it to be 10 minutes. But so if you think about that, so I had genuine mystical experiences happening, but the thing that inspired me to go after them, unfortunately, was some good, true, certainly some good things. Definitely some suffering caused me to need spirituality in my life enough to seek after it. But I have to be honest, looking back, some of what inspired me was the promise of being profoundly special and shining so brightly to the world, but not with a motivation for them, but with a motivation of they'll see me finally. And this was built into the literature that I was reading, and also built into the communities I was a part of. I saw it everywhere I looked. I didn't see it at the time, but as I came out of it and continued relationships with people from those communities, I started to notice what I would now call spiritual narcissism. And that's so what had to happen is that had to be extricated from me. And I guess there's probably 100 ways for that to happen, but the way God did it is somebody walked in my room one night while I was meditating. I heard and felt them come in the room, and they put something on my head, and it felt like a bowl. Felt like someone just put a bowl on my head, and they left, and that was it. But from that day forward, instantly, with no gradual decline, I lost all of my capacity to become cosmic, to go into the cosmic kind of union. I lost all of my capacity to go into bliss, all of my capacity for that true, infinite spiritual joy that I had at that time. And I also lost my capacity to go into the love that was at that point so expansive that I could feel sometimes the whole universe connected to that love. And And so they just took it away. They just put a lid on my head and took it away, and it was just gone. And then in comes Christianity that gives the hope of a very similar kind of union, but with a very different theology and a very different understanding that's very balanced with the stark reality of our disorder, of our woundedness, of our brokenness, of our pride, of the pride of self, and which is really the foundation of all sort of spiritual ego. And I was led to go and do that kind of hard work on the deep, dark, and ugly parts of my nature, and came to see the beautiful value of that, the gifts that brings on so many levels, which I won't go into now because it'll just become the whole video. So that's a long explanation of saying, how did I lose this piece of meditation that is so important to me? And why did it take so long to bring it back to the community? And so what I think is, for me, I was unable to meditate after that period. When they put the bowl on my head, I forgot how to meditate. I even remember sitting down to meditate and saying, I have forgotten how to meditate. I had been meditating 3 to 5 hours a day for 10 years at that point. And I sat down and had no memory, no body memory, no visceral memory, no feeling. I knew the technique, but that's it. Everything else was gone. And that this new kind of meditation that I'm sort of passing on to you guys was also removed. And so then regular meditation stuck. I quit doing that other kind of meditation, partially because I learned it from a system that is in many ways incompatible with Christian spirituality and Christian mysticism. There are elements to it that are completely incompatible and in contradiction to it. So and also the way that I was using that other kind of meditation was deeply narcissistic, I believe now. I think it was prideful. I mean, it was all the same stuff I've said. You're wonderful. You're going to shine. You're so neat. You're so special. And, just being told that over and over down in that other kind of meditation or imagining it. Whereas if I was a Christian, if I had been brought up in a Christian tradition that was contemplative, I would have been taught to do the same state of consciousness and the same kind of meditation. But I would have been taught to adore Christ and his infinite glory, or to instead of looking at my glory and being inspired by how bright I was going to become, which was just the message. You're inundated with it in the path I was on before Christianity. It's just said all the time. And so if I had been raised in a contemplative, I had been brought up in a contemplative tradition rather than in what I was brought up in, I would have been taught to adore Christ, to adore the Trinity, to revel and glory in God's greatness, to appreciate, to be filled with profound gratitude for an infinite God that is so absurdly loving that it is difficult to describe or comprehend, that it's silly in its abundance of giving and love. That would have been an entirely different ascent and an entirely different sort of spirituality. It would have led to the same blinding white light. It would have been the same light. It would have been the same love. It would have been the same cosmic consciousness, but with a completely different paradigm tied to it. One of humility and one of surrender and one of gratitude rather than one of claiming and standing and choosing. It would have been so different. But I also have to say, had I been exposed to real Christianity, contemplative Christianity at that time, it's also probably true that some of the teachings would have turned me off and made me much less interested in radically giving my life to God, because there were and are some pretty ugly things inside of me, as there are all human beings, that must be addressed and dealt with in a serious way. And I think at the time that would have scared me off. So it all worked out fine. But the point is that I lost this kind of meditation along the way, and for 4 or 5 or 6 times I reopened to it. I would tell various people about it, just at the center, maybe people I just happened to be talking to. And it would come back for a moment, and then it would be lost. And the reason it was lost is because the neural pathways, the along with that opening would come the old theology. Along with that opening would come the old paradigm. Along with that opening would come aspects that are completely incompatible with authentic spirituality. And so there just was no way to get it out until it came out. I also think that it is true that this is good timing for it to come to the center and to the people in the center. And you might think, well, how could that be? We have new people here that haven't been through the night yet, or aren't even halfway through the night, where it starts to ease and look more like a light than a darkness. Why would they be exposed to it if we weren't for so long? And what I think about that is the power of community. 25 people sitting together in a circle that have done a lot of work hold a certain space. They hold a certain energy. There's a certain potentiality there. And when a new person comes in, if they're surrounded by 5 or 6 or 8 people that have been through the night and are on the other side of it, there's a depth there that just can't be in the room when everyone in the room has not yet been through that period. So what I'm thinking now is, because some people are in the night, still ascending towards the deepest part of it, some people are on the way out of the deepest part of it. They've gone to the center of the forest and they're on their way out. And other people are fully out of the night and going into the light and the joy and the love of it. Now we have a more mature community with more potentiality. And so if a new person comes in and they're exposed to this other kind of meditation, which will now be presented in a completely Christian way, if a new person comes in and is exposed to that now, their community that they live in contains so much night, so much, not that we're really humble, but so much found humility, so much of a recognition of, if we're not deeply humble, at least a deep, deep knowing of the profound importance, the foundational importance of humility. And that is a different experience for that new person. And it changes everything, as I'm seeing more and more every day now. Even up into the bliss is a very different experience post-night. It's just something else, and it's wonderful. So that's all I'm going to say about that, and then I want to cover just a few more just things as people have spoken to me about their experience with this. It's been almost universally well received by the community. It's really helping people in the way that it helps me and did help me in my earlier years. And I'm even seeing how much of it came from this other kind of meditation and I didn't know it. How much what I had then. And so I think there's this great gift being given the community. There's a great gift being given the community here. It's good. It's really good. Okay, so I just realized I should have shot this video for Thursday class because I still have to do Thursday class, and I might just call this Thursday class, post a meditation video. That might be better. I'm going to do that because otherwise that's about 5 hours I'd be sitting here today instead of 2 or 2.5. Okay, so sorry about that. Okay, so here are some questions though and comments from people that I think would be very helpful. How visual should it be? I'm describing going down this tunnel, or in the newer video, just sinking down with no tunnel. And then we're, either the body of Christ in this last video and Jesus and Mary, but it could also be a leaf or a tree or a river or whatever it is, the book of nature, as it's called in Christian spirituality, the book of nature. And how visual should your experience be? And it is absolutely irrelevant. And if anybody is tripping up at all on that, hear this and let this sink into your bones. It doesn't matter how visual it is. It doesn't matter how clearly you see anything. That is irrelevant. The only thing that really must grow in you as you do the practice is a sense that you are somewhere else than your room. A sense of sort of being immersed in the experience. Not even that you're somewhere else. Just that you are immersed in the experience. And the visual nature of it can be quite limited and still be a very powerful experience. And we know this. I'm just going to mention Jill. I'm certain I have her permission. She named the condition, and I've forgotten the name. She has a condition where she is not visual. She's decidedly not visual. She barely sees images in her mind at all. It might not be a condition. It might be a label. But she has this, and so. And then I was thinking too, in talking with her about that and how this new kind of meditation is quite powerful for her anyway. Then I was thinking of my experience and what are my worst days down in there in this kind of meditation. What are my worst days? And it's my worst day is like this. I see a flower, and the flower is just a flash, a momentary image in my mind of a flower with not great detail. And then it fades. But I do sort of feel somehow, slightly connected to that flower or the place, right? Or the setting. And then if I decide to look more closely at the flower, then I'll just see a petal with some lines running through it, maybe the veins, that go through the petal of a flower. But it's not a clear image. But I can still investigate. I can still say, well, I'd like to look right at that vein, and I just get an impression, but it's a vague impression. It's not always colorful. Sometimes it's colorless. And then Jill is similar to this, and yet she's having meaningful experiences with this other kind of meditation. So let it sink into your mind and heart that how visual it is irrelevant. And then also, if we're going to be reading one another's accounts, which we won't do too much of, I'm really glad people wrote what they wrote on YouTube. If you haven't read those, you should go read them. But never compare how elaborate one person's experience is with another. It's irrelevant. If someone's artistically inclined, and if any of that artistic inclination happens to be visual, they're likely to have extremely elaborate experiences in that other kind of meditation. And if they're extremely creative types, then the way in which that experience unfolds might be quite involved. That's great, but that's just them being them. That's not really reflection of anything at all. And my wife, her encounters in that place are actually often quite simple but profound. Right? All of that noise, for her experience, would be all of that elaborate nature would be, adornments that take away from the profundity of the experience. So please set aside, I don't know if anyone's struggling with that, but just set aside any sort of egoic comparisons with others and any sort of, disenchantment that comes with comparing, and just know yourself down in there, because where you're going is just halfway down into meditation, right? So remember, you probably all were told by me, if you're getting down in there and a really creative idea comes to you, don't listen to that creative idea. It's a distraction. Go deeper. I'm sure every one of you had me harp on you in the beginning about this in meditation. That creative idea is a distraction. That intuition is a distraction. Go deeper, because we must find the deep. We must find the super essential, the ground of everything, that which must exist, that which must be there. We have to find not the message, but the messenger, right? Not the words, but the speaker of the words. And so we went past all of that. All we're doing here is going halfway down and staying there to a part of our mind, but also a part of God, and also a part of probably, I'm quite certain, the collective mind, the body of Christ mind, where we sort of all share minds together. So that's kind of where you're going. Okay, so then, and I think there's something to be said about that. You're living and you're moving around and you're being in a dimension that is inherently very close to God and filled with archetypal symbols that don't need to be cognitively understood, but that are absorbed. And so the tree is an archetype, and, bear is an archetype. I've got this tiger that comes and it's really strong. And it makes me feel a little stronger to be around it. And sometimes when I can't do something, I get on its back and it helps me get somewhere I couldn't get on my own. And then sometimes it comes and doesn't say anything. I don't get words, but it comes and won't let me ride it. It's almost like it's saying, you can do that, dude. Just go do it. And it's just neat. You're down in there interacting with the mind of God in symbolic form, right? Because everything in creation must have come from God's mind. And that means little flowers do, and bunnies do, and rainbows do, pebbles do, and the grass does, and the river does, and all of that comes out of God's mind. And it's all a reflection of God's mind, an expression of God's mind, and a word from God's mind. And you're just spending time down in there doing that. Okay, so one person said, from this kind of meditation, they felt like they went down in there and just hung around, didn't do anything. They didn't mention to me anything particularly special or neat. But they felt like when they came back, they had sort of regained or reconnected with a part of themselves they had lost. And we know from being at the center how much trauma, really shocks a person, right? And how we can lose the joy of our childhood, or the innocence, or the inquisitiveness, or how many things about us that are really neat can be lost because of trauma that has happened in our lives. And so he just felt like he got some of that back by going down in there. Another sort of, many people have shared with me now, thing that has come from this is they went outside after having done this sort of other kind of meditation, and they just noticed an immediate and deeper connection with nature. And sort of the soul of, nature. You look at a tree, it's just a tree if you're half dead, But as you wake up, you look at a tree, and the tree it's this living thing. It's alive. And you can know it. And I know one woman who regularly attends with us, who doesn't say a lot. She has a very intimate connection in this way with nature. It's extremely intimate and deep, and it's beautiful. And so a lot of people have said from this kind of other meditation was an immediate connection with nature. Nature just seemed more beautiful, more vibrant, more alive. And I would just add animals. I've got some pets, and it's different when you're exposed to this. You start to wake up to it. Then you look at an animal and you look right in its soul. It's just different, and they notice too. You're having a different connection because you've been down in there merging and connecting with trees. You've been becoming stones, right? You've been becoming trees and stones and birds and flowers and the breeze and sunlight and drops of dew and sound and color and shape. You have found a way to apprehend. I know this is barely starting with everybody. I'm not saying it's very, very developed yet. But in this sort of other kind of meditation, you gain the ability to apprehend reality spiritually. So you're just not looking at a tree that you only have one connection with, which is visual. Maybe you can smell it, so now it's visual and you can smell it, and maybe you can hear it, the leaves blowing in the wind, so you can hear it and see it and smell it. That's nice. But when you're going down into this other kind of meditation, you're connecting with that tree spiritually. You're connecting with its pulp and its living soul, and you know it in a much more intimate way. You experience that, and you've become that tree. Become the roots in the ground. You become the leaves ascending up to the sky. You've felt what it's like to be that deep in the ground while being that tall. And it's stretched you. And then when you go out in nature and you look at a tree, you don't quite see that tree the same again. And that is if there's a goal of this kind of meditation, one of the goals is to, what you can do down in there, you can do up here. And it just starts to bleed over. And that's wonderful. And it goes for people too, right? It goes for everything. You just become more connected. And through what? Connected through Christ. Connected through Christ, right? Christ, He's the way, right? So we come to Christ, and all exist in Him, and He in them, and Jesus in the Trinity, right? So it's like Jesus is this sort of uniter of the entire cosmos to the heart of the Trinity. That's His role. And in coming to know Christ and in coming into Christ, we also we are connected to what Christ is connected to. And so we're connecting through the Holy Spirit, and we're connecting through Jesus, and we're connecting through salvation to all things. This is what it is. And there's only one sort of force that is connected to everything infinitely, and that is God. And so as we get led into God, we are also led into this experience of connection and union with others. And this kind of meditation, and go down in there. I think the last video I said you just see a pyramid shape, a rock shaped like a pyramid, and just you become the shape of the pyramid, and then I don't remember all. Maybe it becomes a color, and all of that is just, can you be flexible? Can you stop being just the way you are and be a different way? And one person said, I don't think this is for me. I don't think this is for me. And I said, well, maybe not now, but certainly someday, yes. Because this person has found a sense of safety because of living in unsafe conditions by being rigid and fixed. And that rigidity and that fixed sort of, I will control this because the rest is out of my control. It's something we do. And so, if you become a drop of dew, maybe a drop of dew that has a frog's reflection imprinted on it, that's way down in that pond. Maybe you're that drop of dew with a frog's reflection and a pond's reflection mirrored on its surface. When you become that, you are less rigid. You are practicing fluidity. You're practicing the ability to when the Holy Spirit blows upon you, you go with it. Because you are, first of all, noticing more, and second of all, not so stuck being the way you think you are. It's wonderful. It's just wonderful. Okay. These are just a couple more notes, and then maybe we'll be just about done. One person said, this is a person who has some trauma in their past they've been unable to really and truly connect with, said that down in there, even though it wasn't a particularly visual experience, nothing of note happened that, would sound good in a YouTube comment, or in a description of it if we were sharing in group. But they said they got emotionally in touch with this trauma in a way that has been not really open to them in the past. So another wonderful benefit of this other kind of meditation. Then I just want to say that I think I mentioned earlier that Christianity did use this kind of meditation and does. It's actually called meditation in Christianity. Remember, we have prayer, meditation, and contemplation, and meditation is where you think deeply, but also visualize scriptures or theology. And I will certainly make videos that go in that direction also. One of my favorite ways to use this other kind of meditation is to go down in there and go to a place that's just all black and doesn't have any forms of any kind, and think about theology and how those thoughts and principles, think of the Trinity or God or love, or, how is it that we're one with God, and if, God is personal and we're personal, but we're also one, and what does that mean? You can be down in there thinking about that in a very living way, in a way that will bring you to tears, in a way that moves you, in a way that connects you to the experience and the reality of it, and makes it not just thinking, but experiencing it. And this was and is used in Christianity all over the place. It's never been lost. And it finds expression in, all kinds of other ways. I know there's a cross. You guys all haven't been to the center for so long, but above my head is a picture of Jesus. And below that picture of Jesus is a cross. And the cross, it's right there. You can see it below the picture of Jesus. The cross has a Mother Mary on it. It has an image of Mother Mary on it. And Mary's brother, my wife's brother, brought it from Mexico. He saw it and thought of me and bought it. And he's not religious, and it was surprising for him to bring that, actually, very. But when I held it, what I noticed was an immediate outpouring of Mother Mary's energy and Christ's energy from that cross into my body, and it's always been that way. And that's found in a more they call this, we read the scriptures Lectio Divina, then there's Lectio Visio. It's not something I've talked about much. Lectio Visio. And that's where you take a picture, some kind of an image of a scripture setting, but it could be a nature setting, and you enter into that, or you open yourself to that spiritually. And the Orthodox Church has icons, which are a pretty, refined form of this kind of practice, but it's found everywhere in Christianity. In any contemplative tradition, it's built into the Rosary. It's everywhere you look, it's there. And so I wanted just to mention that this really isn't anything new. It's just now we're making it a more prominent part of what we do. And so when I do the beginning where you're walking in nature and you go through a tunnel, why the tunnel? Well, that's just because that's how I learned how to get into that state of consciousness. That's why. There's no other reason. The tunnel isn't really a tunnel. It's a mythological representation of a transition from one state of consciousness to another. Like, think of it that way. If you didn't visualize and you sat in meditation, and it was a good day, you would get deeper and deeper until you were no longer so, probably even unaware of the room you're in. You're not thinking of the room anymore. That's gone. You're not thinking of your day anymore. You're now somewhere else. Well, if you dreamed that experience rather than just did it in a non-visual way, you might go through a tunnel, mightn't you? Just, you were here on the surface, you go down through the tunnel and come out in this other place. That's the dream representation. That's the mythological representation. That's the visual representation of a journey you take often, actually. But now you're being given permission to get off the ladder instead of just go deeper, even though twice a day we're going to go deeper than that, because that's the real cure to what ails humanity, the real depths. I thought for just knowledge's sake, you might like to know that Thomas Edison used this state of consciousness. He didn't learn it the way I learned it, and I don't think he learned it from Christianity. I really don't know where he picked it up, but what he would do is he would lay back in a comfortable chair. He had a metal object in his hand and a metal pan beneath the metal object, and he would drift into sleep. And when he was half asleep, he could invent things. He could think deeply and undisturbed about whatever subject he was thinking about. I try to really hear that. That's one of the great uses of this kind of meditation. You can forget the world and forget your body and have as your object the thing you are thinking about with no distraction whatsoever. You're just, if it's a cup or if it's the Trinity or if it's whatever it is, you can get completely immersed in that thought and have no other sort of experience of any other reality external to that. And that's just what Thomas Edison would do. And then when he would fall too far into sleep, his hand would lose its grip on whatever this object was he held. It would fall and hit the pan, wake him up, pick up the object, and go for another round. And some of you are saying you're falling asleep too much. Do something like that. Use Thomas Edison's technique. It's genius. And I'm going to use it too, because sometimes I go too deep. I sit all the way up when I do this. I don't lay down anymore because I'm almost certain to go to sleep quickly. And so I sit up, and that helps a lot. But even then, sometimes I'll come out 2 hours later, having done a very short amount of time in that dimension and then sinking into the deeper place. So this could be a remedy. You can hold something in your hand that drops and makes a noise, pick it up, and you could sort of ride that space longer in that way. Okay, this might be all. Yeah, that's going to be everything. And the only other thing I want to say is that if for some reason it just doesn't seem like it's time for you to do this kind of meditation, don't do it. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It's going to become a part of your life because you have a mind and you are a human being like all human beings, and you have a dream mind, you have an intuitive mind, a creative mind, and you have a connection to that. That's always going to be it's going to be a part of your experience. Excuse me. At some point in your life, but if just now it just doesn't seem right, then just don't even worry about that. Just put it aside, and that will be okay. All right, guys, that's it. 46 minutes, so it's plenty. I hope this is an okay. I just sat down to do a quick video before I shot Thursday group, and this came out. So I just think timing-wise, it's going to be better if I make this the Thursday group video. So Jesus is wonderful. Go in, get a picture of Jesus that you like, and go down in there and stand before his image and see if you can't notice that it is a living image with living powers down in that other state of mind. And same with the Trinity, and same with Mary, and same with any scripture. And it's only a matter of, you don't have to go through the tunnel unless the tunnel is very useful to you. It's so useful to me, I'll just use it forever. But it isn't necessary. What is necessary is that shift in consciousness from ordinary mind to the myth mind. Okay, I hope this was useful as a Thursday class. And I'll see you guys on Zoom, and maybe I'll find out.